It all started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning. The sun was rising, coffee was brewing, and I was getting ready for work like any other day. Nothing felt out of place until I stepped outside and found an empty driveway. At first, I thought I had parked on the street the night before and simply forgotten. But after scanning the road and checking the garage, the sinking realization hit me. My car was gone. No broken glass, no signs of forced entry, just gone. I froze for a second, my brain scrambling for explanations. Maybe it got towed. Maybe I left the doors unlocked and someone had stolen it. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding, and just as I was about to call the police, I got a text. It was from Karen. Casual as ever, no apology, no explanation. Just a photo of her grinning behind the wheel of my car with a caption that read, "Borrowed your ride for a quick errand. Be back soon." Karen, my neighbor. The woman who always acted like the world owed her a favor. She had a habit of blurring boundaries, taking packages off my porch, letting her dog do its business on my lawn, and always forgetting to return things she borrowed. But this was next level. She had taken my car without permission. No note, no heads up, nothing. I stood there, stunned, rage bubbling under my skin. Who does that? Who just helps themselves to someone else's vehicle like it's a public rental? That was the moment I knew something had to change. Karen had crossed the line for the last time, and while she thought she was just taking a harmless little joyride, I was already planning how to make sure it would be her last. Looking back, the warning signs were always there. I just chose to ignore them. When Karen first moved into the neighborhood, she came off as charming in that overly friendly kind of way. Always quick with a wave, always just popping by with some excuse to borrow something. It started small, a cup of sugar here, a roll of tape there. No big deal, right? We're neighbors after all. But then she started holding on to things a little too long. I'd lend her a charger, and it would mysteriously disappear. She'd borrow a folding chair for a barbecue, and I'd find it weeks later, dusty and forgotten in her backyard. I brushed it off as harmless flakiness. Some people just aren't great with boundaries. But it escalated. One day I came home to find her walking out of my garage. She claimed she was just looking for her dog, but she had no business being there. I should have called her out more firmly, but instead, I let it slide with an awkward smile and a, "Just ask next time." And that became the pattern. Karen would overstep, I'd get annoyed, and she'd charm her way out of it with a laugh or some flimsy excuse. I started feeling like a pushover in my own home. What really struck me was how entitled she acted when confronted. There was this smugness, this unshakable belief that rules didn't apply to her. Once, she parked her car in my driveway for 3 whole days because street parking was a hassle. No text, no warning, just assumed it was fine. When I asked her to move it, she acted like I was overreacting, like I was being dramatic for wanting to use my own driveway. She had a way of making you feel unreasonable for setting basic boundaries. Over time, I found myself tiptoeing around her, trying to avoid conflict, but that only gave her more room to invade my space. I realized she thrived on that, on people being too polite to say no. The more I tolerated, the more she took. And yet, even with all of that, nothing could have prepared me for the day she took things too far. That day, she didn't just cross the line, she stomped all over it and smiled while doing it. The day she took my car without asking is seared into my memory like a scar that refuses to fade. It was a Friday morning, the kind of day you look forward to all week. Almost the weekend, plans already forming in your head. I had a meeting scheduled that morning and errands lined up after work, so I was in my usual rush, coffee in one hand, keys supposed to be in the other, but they weren't. I checked the kitchen counter, the coat rack, my bag. Nothing. At first, I thought I'd misplaced them. It wouldn't be the first time I'd left them in a jacket pocket or the bathroom counter. Then I opened the door to the driveway and froze. My car was gone. Not parked in the usual spot, not nearby, not anywhere in sight. My heart dropped. I stood there, stunned, staring at the vacant slab of concrete like it might magically produce my vehicle if I looked hard enough. Panic began to set in. Had it been stolen? Had I left the doors unlocked? Was this my fault somehow? A million thoughts were rushing through my mind as I pulled out my phone and started dialing the non-emergency police line. And that's when the message came in. A bubbly, chipper text from Karen. "Hey, Hope you don't mind, I borrowed your car real quick to run to the outlets. I'll fill up the tank. Be back later. I remember just staring at the screen, my jaw slack. It was like reading a bad joke in real time. She took my car, without asking, without even letting me know until she was already on the road. I called her immediately, my hands shaking, fury rising in my chest. She picked up after the second ring, all cheerful and casual like we were best friends. Oh, hey! Yeah, I figured you wouldn't mind. You weren't using it, right? I'll be super quick. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her tone wasn't apologetic. She sounded entitled, like she had every right to help herself to my personal property, like I was the one being unreasonable for being upset. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. I told her it wasn't okay, that she had no right to take my car, that this wasn't just borrowing, it was theft. She laughed, said I was being dramatic, said I needed to relax. I hung up on her, heart pounding, fists clenched. I had never felt so disrespected in my life. It wasn't just the car, it was the principle, the violation of trust, the total disregard for basic decency. That's when I knew this wasn't going to blow over. Karen didn't just take my car. She shattered any illusion that she respected me or my boundaries. And in that moment, as I stood there seething in my empty driveway, a dangerous thought took root. If she wanted to play games, I'd make sure she learned what happens when you play with the wrong person. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that after I confronted her, she got the message, apologized, and backed off. But this was Karen we were talking about. And for people like her, boundaries don't exist. They're suggestions at best, challenges at worst. A week passed after the first incident, and I made it clear she wasn't welcome to touch my car again. I even had the locks reprogrammed, thinking that would put an end to it. I was wrong, dead wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon when it happened again. I'd just gotten back from grocery shopping, lugged everything inside, and sat down for a well-earned break. I glanced out the window, and the driveway was empty. My heart skipped a beat. No way. I rushed outside hoping I'd parked around the corner or made some kind of mistake. But deep down, I already knew. It was happening again. I checked my phone and saw a string of messages from Karen, as if she had done nothing wrong. Taking your car to the lake with the girls, promise we won't scratch it. My hands were shaking. The audacity was beyond comprehension. She hadn't just taken it, she was flaunting it, bragging about it. She had no remorse, no fear, no shame. It was as if my car was hers to use whenever she felt like it. I called her, and this time I didn't hold back. I let her have it. She responded with her usual nonsense. Don't be so uptight. We're just having fun. You weren't even using it. The excuses came tumbling out like a pre-recorded loop of entitlement. I told her this was theft, plain and simple, and if she ever touched my property again, there would be consequences. She laughed again, then said something that stuck with me. Relax. What are you going to do? Call the cops on me? That was it, the final straw. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she could do whatever she wanted and walk away smiling. But what she didn't know was that I'd already started planning. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about respect, about putting an end to the arrogance, the manipulation, the belief that she could get away with anything. I wasn't going to yell anymore. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. After that second incident, something shifted in me. I was done being the polite neighbor. Done reasoning with someone who clearly didn't respect the difference between what's hers and what's mine. Karen had pushed me past the edge, and this time I wasn't just going to react. I was going to respond, calmly, quietly, and in a way she'd never see coming. I knew trying to involve the police would be a waste of time. It would be my word against hers, and she'd spin it like she always did. Oh, we're friends. He said I could use it any time. No proof, no real damage, no help. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. That night, I stayed up researching. Not just watching a few videos online, I went deep. Forums, tutorials, expert tips. What I was looking for was simple, a way to shut down my car remotely if she ever took it again. I found exactly what I needed, an aftermarket kill switch system. legal to install, fully functional, and perfectly tailored to teach someone like Karen a harsh lesson. It was a small, hidden device that could be installed inside the car, wired directly to the ignition and battery. With a tap on my phone, I could cut all power to the engine. The car wouldn't go anywhere unless I reactivated it. To anyone who didn't know it was there, it would just seem like a car that mysteriously died in the middle of the road. I ordered the parts immediately and paid for express shipping. When they arrived, I spent the weekend installing the system myself. I made sure it was discreet, invisible even to someone nosy. I tested it over and over, learning how to activate it with a tap, deactivate it with a code. I even programmed it to send me alerts when the ignition turned on. Karen had gotten into the habit of taking my car while I was inside, occupied, unaware. That would never happen again without me knowing. And then I waited. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't brag, didn't hint. I simply kept my spare key where she had found it last time, in the little drawer by the door. I even made a point of going out of town for a day, leaving my car parked out front like bait. Sure enough, the moment I left, she struck again. I got the notification on my phone, engine started, location tracking enabled. There it was. Karen was behind the wheel, driving my car, smiling like she always did when she thought she was untouchable. But this time, she wasn't heading to the mall or the lake. She was heading out into the desert, a road trip with friends, probably some spontaneous getaway. I watched the car move on the map, mile after mile into the dry, barren stretches beyond the city. No shade, no gas stations, no cell towers, just heat and dirt and endless road. I waited until they were far enough that walking back wasn't an option and calling for help would be a nightmare. Then I tapped the button. The engine cut out, the car slowed, then stopped. Just like that. Powerless. Stranded. Karen had no idea what had just happened, but I did. My plan had worked, and it was only just beginning. The sun was hanging high over the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren desert road when I shut the engine down. I watched the little blue dot on my GPS tracker come to a halt in the middle of nowhere. No gas stations, no roadside diners, not even a sliver of shade nearby. Just blistering heat, empty dirt roads, and silence. It was perfect. I could almost hear the confusion in her voice from miles away. I imagined her pressing the gas pedal, tapping the dashboard, swearing under her breath as the car refused to respond. I could see her pulling over, popping the hood like that would help, completely clueless that her joyride had just turned into a nightmare. I waited. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to savor the moment. A few minutes passed, then a call came through. It wasn't from her number. It was from some unknown contact. I didn't answer. Then a second call, and a third. Still, I let them ring out. Eventually, I got a message. "Hey, it's Karen. Something's wrong with your car. We're kinda stuck out here. Can you call me back?" No apology, no humility, just an entitled demand masked with a hint of fake concern. I didn't reply. An hour went by. Then another. The messages started to shift. The confidence began to crack. Seriously, this isn't funny. It's like 100 degrees out here. Another message. "My phone's about to die. I swear I'll never borrow your car again. Just help me out." That's when I knew it was working. The desert had a way of stripping away a person's arrogance, and I had just handed her front row tickets to the show. By the third hour, I finally picked up. She sounded hoarse, a little frantic, trying hard not to let the panic show in her voice. Okay, I get it. You made your point. Can you please just get this thing working again? It's not funny anymore." I let the silence hang for a moment before calmly responding. "You took my car without permission. Again. And now you're learning what happens when you take something that isn't yours." She tried to argue, said she was just borrowing it, said I was overreacting. I stopped her right there. "No. You've walked all over me long enough. This isn't a prank. This is me showing you what it feels like to be powerless." She went quiet. For once, she had no comeback. Just silence and the low hum of desert wind crackling through the phone. Eventually, one of her friends managed to get a weak signal and called for roadside assistance. It took them hours to find her, stuck in the middle of nowhere, the heat taking its toll, tempers flaring, cell phones dead. When they finally made it back to civilization, Karen looked like she'd been through a war, sunburnt, dehydrated, and defeated. She didn't say a word to me when she returned the car, just tossed the keys on my porch and stormed off. I checked the car over, no scratches, no damage, nothing missing. She didn't even have the nerve to complain afterward, not to my face, not to the neighbors. She knew, deep down, she knew she'd earned every second of that miserable afternoon. That's the thing about people like her. They only understand consequences when they feel them firsthand. Later that night, I got one final message. "You're a real piece of work. Don't worry, I'll never touch your stuff again." I smiled and deleted it. Mission accomplished. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming control, about setting a boundary so loud she couldn't ignore it. And if that meant leaving her stranded in the desert heat with nothing but time to reflect on her choices, then so be it. Some lessons don't come easy. Some have to be baked into your memory by the unforgiving sun and silence of a place where no one's around to save you. The next few days were quiet, eerily quiet. Karen didn't knock on my door. She didn't pace around the neighborhood trying to rally sympathy. She didn't even look in my direction. But I knew that silence wasn't peace. It was the calm before another storm. Sure enough, the fallout came, not directly from her, but through whispers around the block. One neighbor casually mentioned that Karen had a rough weekend and was telling people her car broke down in the middle of nowhere. Another said she was warning folks about how unreliable I was, how I had a temper, and how people should be careful around me. It was typical Karen, still trying to control the narrative, even after getting exactly what she deserved. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. She finally showed up at my door. Not to apologize, not to return the key she'd kept hidden in her purse. She came with that same self-righteous fire in her eyes, demanding an explanation. I opened the door, and before I could say a word, she launched into her tirade, accused me of endangering her, claimed I could have killed her and her friends, told me I was a psychopath with a vendetta. I let her rant. I didn't flinch. When she paused for breath, I looked her in the eyes and calmly asked her a single question. "Did you ask for my permission before taking my car?" She froze, just for a second, but it was enough. That flicker of realization, of guilt, of knowing she didn't have a leg to stand on. She tried to pivot, to make it about how I'd overreacted, how it was just a car, but the fire in her voice didn't land the way it used to. I wasn't playing the game anymore. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just reminded her that actions have consequences, especially when you treat other people's property like your own. She left with a bitter glare, but she didn't come back. No more texts, no more borrowing, no more pretending we were friendly neighbors. And honestly, that was the best outcome I could have hoped for. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed her to understand that the days of taking whatever she wanted were over. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect of what happened began to show itself. Karen, once the loudest voice in the neighborhood, suddenly went quiet. Her usual air of superiority seemed to vanish. The constant gatherings at her place stopped. The stream of visitors slowed to a trickle. Word had clearly gotten around. Maybe it was from the friends who had been with her during that scorching afternoon in the desert. Or maybe it was from neighbors who had quietly taken notice of her antics for far too long. Either way, something shifted. She tried to act like nothing had happened. I'd see her sometimes, walking her dog with a forced smile, offering quick nods instead of the usual over-the-top waves. But the energy was different. People didn't seem as eager to chat with her. Conversations ended quicker, eye contact dropped sooner. Her reputation had taken a hit, and not because I broadcasted anything. I didn't have to. When someone exposes themselves as the kind of person who takes without asking, lies when caught, and plays the victim when held accountable, eventually people see it for what it is. One day I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was the spare key she'd taken. No note, no explanation, just the key. That was her way of surrendering, of finally admitting, without words, that she'd lost. I took it, locked it away, and changed the locks on everything she might have had access to. No more chances, no more trust. She had made her choice, and now she was living with it. Oddly enough, the neighborhood felt more peaceful after that. The tension lifted, the drama faded, and I went about my life without the constant anxiety of wondering what Karen would do next. I didn't seek revenge to be cruel, I didn't do it to hurt her, I did it to reclaim control over my life, my boundaries, and my property. And in doing so, I found something better than an apology or a confrontation. I found closure. Justice didn't come in the form of handcuffs or court dates. It came in the form of silence, distance, and the sweet satisfaction of knowing she'd think twice before crossing the wrong person again. In the end, what this entire experience taught me was far bigger than a stolen car or a ruined weekend. It was about boundaries, real ones, the kind you draw not just with words, but with actions. I used to believe that being a good neighbor meant always keeping the peace, even when it cost me my comfort. I thought letting the little things slide was just part of maintaining harmony. But what I've come to realize is that some people don't understand limits unless you set them in stone. And sometimes the only way to be heard is to stop talking and start acting. Karen didn't just borrow my car. She borrowed my trust, my space, my patience. She treated my life like it was a store she could walk through, picking things off the shelves without a second thought. And when confronted, she didn't apologize. She escalated. That kind of entitlement doesn't go away with a polite conversation. It goes away when consequences speak louder than words. I don't take pride in leaving someone stranded, but I don't feel guilty either. It wasn't about revenge, it was about showing that actions have weight, that when you take from others without respect, you eventually hit a wall, a point of no return. I gave Karen chance after chance and she burned every one of them, so I gave her one final lesson, delivered by heat, silence, and a stalled engine. Moving forward, I'll never hesitate to stand up for what's mine. I won't second-guess my right to say no, and I'll remember that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's weakness that gets exploited. So to anyone out there dealing with their own Karen, take it from me, protect your peace. And don't be afraid to teach a lesson when someone clearly needs one.